The scent of pine needles, sharp and sweet, filled my small living room, battling with the comforting aroma of cinnamon and vanilla from the simmering potpourri on the stove. I hummed an old holiday tune, a little off-key, as I carefully hung a tarnished silver bell on the lowest branch of the fresh-cut Fraser fir. My hands, gnarled and spotted with age, moved with a surprising tenderness. Each ornament had a story, a memory etched into its glass or painted onto its surface. This one, the silver bell, was the first decoration my wife, Eleanor, and I ever bought together, nearly 50 years ago. She loved Christmas more than anyone I knew. I stepped back, admiring my handiwork. The tree wasn't grand, but it was perfectly festive, twinkling with warm white lights. My gaze lingered on the empty space beneath it, already imagining the neatly wrapped gifts that would soon fill it. Not many, just a few thoughtful presents for him. For Michael, my son, my only son. A warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the usual chill that settled deep in my bones these days. Michael was coming. After a year, maybe more, of distant calls and quick texts, he was finally coming home for Christmas. I'd spent weeks planning, meticulously mapping out every detail. His favorite roasted duck, the cranberry sauce he always insisted on, the exact type of bourbon he preferred for his evening nightcap. I even bought him that expensive set of golf clubs he'd mentioned once. A casual aside he likely forgot immediately, but I didn't. I never forgot anything when it came to Michael. The old house, usually quiet and filled only with the echoes of my own movements, felt alive with anticipation. I'd dusted every surface, polished the worn wooden banister, and even ventured into the attic to retrieve the worn checkerboard set Michael and I used to play for hours. He always cheated, subtly, charmingly, and I always let him win. It was our secret, a private joke only we shared. I pictured his smile, the way his eyes would crinkle at the corners when he pretended to be surprised by my loss. My heart swelled with a deep, almost painful longing. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about connection. It was about being a family again, even if just for a few precious days. I craved his presence, his laughter, the easy companionship that seemed to grow scarcer with each passing year. I wanted to tell him about the neighborhood gossip, the new rosebush I'd planted, the quiet pride I felt seeing his picture on the local news channel when his company landed that big contract. I wanted to tell him I loved him, truly, deeply. Without reservation, I walked into the kitchen, humming again, pulling out my grandmother's old recipe for gingerbread cookies. The dough was already made, chilling in the fridge, waiting to be rolled out. The smell of ginger and molasses would soon join the symphony of holiday scents. I pictured Michael, a boy again, sneaking bites of raw dough, his face smeared with flour, his eyes wide with mischief. Those were the days, simple, joyful, full of an uncomplicated love. A sudden, sharp pang of anxiety pricked at my bubble of happiness. It was a familiar feeling, one that often accompanied my thoughts of Michael. A faint unease, a flicker of doubt I usually managed to push away. But today, surrounded by the warmth and hope of Christmas, it felt particularly out of place. I shook my head, dismissing it. No, not today. Today was for joy. Today was for family. Today was for my son. I wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron, a smile returning to my lips. He would be here soon. He had to be. My life, after Eleanor passed, had centered entirely on Michael. Every decision, every penny saved, every sacrifice made, had been with him in mind. From the moment he was born, a tiny, squalling bundle in the delivery room, my purpose had crystallized, to give him a better life than I had, a life free from the constant anxieties that had plagued my own youth. I grew up in a small, cramped apartment, my father working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, my mother stretching every meal to feed 5 hungry children. I swore Michael would never know that kind of struggle. Eleanor and I worked tirelessly, she, a diligent bookkeeper, and I, a foreman at the local manufacturing plant, clocked endless hours, saving every spare dollar. Our dream wasn't elaborate. It was simply to provide Michael with stability, education, and the freedom to pursue his passions. We lived modestly, always putting Michael first. His tuition for that private elementary school, then the highly rated prep school, then the prestigious state university. It all came from our combined efforts, our deferred dreams, our unspent luxuries. We never took that trip to Europe Eleanor always talked about, never upgraded our old Ford, never even considered a second bathroom for our modest home. "It's for Michael's future," Eleanor would always say, her eyes shining with unwavering belief. And I always agreed. Our future was Michael. After Eleanor's sudden illness and passing, the void she left was immense, a gaping hole in the fabric of my life. Michael, then in his early 20s, was heartbroken too, but he had his career to focus on, his friends, his own burgeoning life. I, however, was left with a silence that screamed in the empty rooms of our house. It was then that I truly understood the depth of my commitment to him. He was all I had left of her, all I had left of us. My reason for being when Michael graduated college, bursting with ambition. He landed a decent job in the city. He wanted to buy a house, a small bungalow in a nice suburb, but the down payment was daunting. "Dad," he'd said over the phone, his voice a little strained, "I don't know if I can swing it. The market's crazy." Without a second thought, I dipped into the modest savings Eleanor and I had put aside for our retirement. Money we'd envisioned using for quiet cruises and gardening in our golden years. "Don't worry, son," I remembered telling him, my voice firm despite the ache in my chest. "I'll help you. It's what families do." I covered the down payment, a significant chunk of our nest egg, and then, without him even asking, offered to take care of the monthly mortgage payments for the first few years. "Just until you're on your feet, Michael," I'd said. "Get settled, focus on your career. Don't let financial worries hold you back." Those few years turned into a decade. Every single month, without fail, I transferred the exact amount to his bank account. First, it was the bank transfer to cover his mortgage. Then, a few years later, when he married Sarah, his payments increased because they wanted to renovate the kitchen and add an extension. "Dad, the costs are just astronomical," he'd casually mentioned one evening when I called, his tone suggesting it was an obvious problem for me to solve. "If we don't do it now, it'll cost even more later." But we're so stretched. I knew what he meant. Without a word, I adjusted the transfer amount, again and again. A few years later, when their twin girls, Emily and Olivia, were born, and they needed a bigger car, and then private school for the girls because, as Michael put it, public schools just don't have the same resources. "Dad, we want the best for them, don't we?" My own life, meanwhile, grew increasingly lean. The old house needed repairs, a leaky roof, a sputtering furnace, but I always postponed them. Later, I'd tell myself, "Michael needs this more." My pension, while steady, wasn't enough to cover both my living expenses and Michael's increasingly substantial demands. I took on odd jobs, gardening for neighbors, fixing leaky faucets, anything to supplement my income. I rationed my groceries, wore clothes until they were threadbare, and cancelled my only small indulgence, the weekly fishing trip with my old friend. "Frank can't make it this week." "Frank," I'd lie, my voice feigning disappointment. "Got some things around the house." The truth was, I needed the gas money for Michael's payment, or the extra cash for a new school uniform for one of the girls. I remember one particularly cold winter. The furnace in my house finally gave out completely. The repairman quoted a price that made my stomach churn. I looked at the checkbook, thinking of Michael's upcoming mortgage payment, which now included a substantial amount for his girls' horseback riding lessons, something I'd learned about from a fleeting comment Michael made. "The girls are just wild about horses, Dad. They're always begging to go." I shivered, not just from the cold, but from a deep, unsettling feeling. I bundled myself in extra blankets, lit a small space heater I bought at a garage sale, and convinced myself it was fine. Michael's comfort was more important, his family's happiness. My discomfort was temporary, a minor detail. He rarely expressed gratitude. Oh, sometimes, after a new transfer went through, he'd send a quick text, "Thanks, Dad, really appreciate it," or "Couldn't do it without you." But these were fleeting, almost perfunctory. Never a deep conversation, never a heartfelt acknowledgement of the true extent of my sacrifices. It became an unspoken expectation, a silent agreement where I was the perpetual provider, and he, the grateful but largely detached recipient. He saw my support not as an extraordinary act of love, but as his due, a natural extension of his father's role. His entitlement had grown like a subtle weed, intertwining itself with the roots of our relationship, choking out the reciprocal understanding that should have been there. I remember one Thanksgiving, a few years back, when he and Sarah and the girls came over. It was a rare visit. Michael had complained about the long drive, the traffic. I'd spent days cooking, cleaning, making the house perfect. As we sat down to eat, Michael looked around my small, somewhat dated dining room. "You know, Dad," he said, carving a generous slice of turkey for himself, "you should really think about upgrading this place. It's a bit rustic. Sarah and I were just talking about how much bigger and brighter your kitchen could be if you knocked out that wall." He then launched into a detailed description of renovations, comparing it to his own newly remodeled kitchen, complete with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, all paid for, in part, by my monthly contributions. I just nodded, a weak smile fixed on my face, the turkey suddenly tasting like ash in my mouth. He wasn't malicious, not overtly. He simply lacked perspective. He couldn't see, or chose not to see, that his granite countertops came at the expense of my failing furnace, his girls' horseback riding lessons at the cost of my new eye, his comfortable suburban life fueled by my quiet, unacknowledged deprivations. He was caught in a bubble of his own making, a bubble I had painstakingly inflated for him, filled with all the things he wanted and believed he deserved. My friends, the few I still had, would sometimes hint at it. Frank, watching me repair my own leaking faucet with a roll of plumber's tape and a prayer, instead of calling a professional. Still helping Michael out. George?" he'd asked once, his tone gentle but knowing. I'd just grunted in response, changing the subject. It was a source of shame, this imbalanced dynamic, this silent agreement that left me feeling hollowed out, used. But my love for him, my desperate need for his affection and approval, always pushed the doubts aside. He was my son, my only son, and I believed, foolishly perhaps, that deep down he knew, he appreciated, and one day, he would return that love and sacrifice. This Christmas, I told myself, would be that day. That was my unspoken expectation, my desperate hope. The phone rang, shattering the festive quiet of my kitchen like a dropped ornament. I jumped, my heart giving an unwelcome lurch. It was Michael. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up, a smile already forming on my lips. Michael's son, perfect timing. I was just about to roll out the gingerbread dough. "What are you up to? Did you finish up at work?" My voice was warm, brimming with the excitement of an old man anticipating his son's arrival. There was a slight pause on the other end, a barely perceptible hesitation that instantly pricked at my carefully constructed bubble of joy. Then, Michael's voice, smooth and unhurried, came through the line. "Hey Dad." "No, not quite. Still tied up with a few things." "Oh well, that's all right, son," I chuckled, trying to keep the cheer in my voice. "Just make sure you don't overdo it. You need your rest for the drive up here tomorrow. I've got everything ready. The guest room's all set. I even put out your old high school baseball trophies. Remember those? And I've got that special bourbon you like." Chilling, I paused, waiting for his appreciative laugh, for some shared warmth. Instead, another beat of silence, longer this time. Then, Michael cleared his throat. "About that, Dad. Look, I'm really sorry, but I wasn't actually expecting to come up for Christmas this year." The words hit me like a physical blow, a sudden, brutal punch to the gut. The air went out of my lungs in a whoosh. My hand tightened around the phone, my knuckles turning white. "What?" I managed to croak, the single word barely a whisper, a disbelieving gasp. "What do you mean? You weren't expecting to come?" His voice, maddeningly calm, continued without a hint of remorse. "Well, I mean, we talked about it a while ago, right? And I thought I mentioned that Sarah's parents invited us down to their place in Florida. It's just so much more convenient for us, Dad. The girls love the beach, and it's warmer, obviously. Less hassle with all the luggage and the winter clothes. And frankly, with my schedule, the drive up to your place is just a nightmare right now." My mind reeled. Convenient, less hassle. He was talking about my home, our Christmas, as if it were a minor inconvenience on his busy itinerary. But we talked about it. "Michael," I stammered, my voice cracking, a desperate plea in every syllable. "I've been planning for weeks. I got your favorite duck. I bought you those golf clubs. I put up the tree, just like we always do. I thought you were coming." "Yeah, I know, Dad, and I'm really sorry if there was a misunderstanding," he said, but the apology felt hollow, a mere formality. Things just changed. Sarah's parents finalized their plans for us, and it just made more sense. Plus, it's a big deal for Sarah, you know, being with her family for the holidays. His tone implied that my feelings, my plans, my anticipation, were secondary to Sarah's family obligations. My heart twisted, a searing pain blooming in my chest. He was prioritizing them. Again, her family. I repeated, the words tasting like ash. What about your family, Michael? What about me? Dad, don't be dramatic, he said, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. It's just one Christmas. We can always get together some other time. Maybe in the spring, when things calm down. We'll FaceTime on Christmas Day. Okay, I'll call you then. FaceTime. I choked out, a wave of nausea washing over me. The idea of looking at his face on a screen, pretending to celebrate, while he was basking in the Florida sun with his convenient family, felt like a cruel joke. Michael, I can't believe this. After everything, after all these years, my voice trailed off, too raw, too choked with emotion to continue. The decades of sacrifice, the endless monthly payments, the deferred dreams, they all flashed before my eyes, suddenly feeling like a foolish waste. Dad, I really have to go, he interrupted, cutting off my unspoken lament. Got another call coming in. Look, I'll send you a gift, okay? And we'll talk soon. Have a good one. And with that, he hung up. Just like that. No lingering goodbyes, no genuine remorse, no offer to reconsider. Just a quick, dismissive click. I stood there, the dead phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone a mournful hum in the sudden, crushing silence of the kitchen. The gingerbread dough sat untouched on the counter. The pine scent from the living room now seemed to mock me. The carefully placed ornaments, the twinkling lights, the empty space beneath the tree, they all became symbols of my utter foolishness. My profound heartbreak. The shock slowly gave way to a cold, devastating realization. This wasn't just a cancelled plan. This was a profound act of disrespect, a casual discard of my love and sacrifice. His convenient plans highlighted the deep, ugly truth of our relationship. I was a utility, a resource to be tapped, not a cherished father. My worth was measured by what I could provide, not by who I was. And now, when my emotional presence was all I had to offer, he didn't need it. He didn't want it. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably, the phone slipping from my grasp and clattering onto the counter. I felt a profound sense of humiliation, a burning shame that tightened my chest. He had treated me like an afterthought, a minor inconvenience, something to be tidied away so he could enjoy his hassle-free Christmas. The ingratitude was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. It wasn't just about Christmas. It was about every sacrifice, every late night, every penny, every unsaid word of thanks. It was about a lifetime of giving, met with a casual, indifferent shrug. The crushing disappointment was an unbearable weight, pressing down on my spirit, threatening to suffocate me. My son, my only son, had just shattered my heart into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The days that followed, Michael's call blurred into a melancholic haze. The festive decorations, which just days before had filled me with such hope, now felt like a cruel mockery. The twinkling lights cast long, accusing shadows. The pine needles, once sweet, now smelled faintly of decay. I couldn't bring myself to take them down. They remained, silent witnesses to my shattered dreams. My profound despair. I drifted through the house like a ghost, each step echoing the emptiness within me. The gingerbread dough, once a symbol of shared joy, sat untouched in the fridge, eventually discarded. The golf clubs, still in their pristine box, became an emblem of my foolish generosity, a monument to a love that was clearly unreciprocal. I just stared at them sometimes, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Sleep became an elusive visitor. My nights were long, dark stretches punctuated by replays of Michael's phone call, his calm, dismissive tone ringing in my ears. I wasn't expecting to come up for Christmas this year. The words sliced through me again and again, each repetition a fresh wound. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. My mind, usually calm and orderly, was a chaotic storm of questions, accusations, and a deep guttural cry of why. Why? Why had I given him everything? Why had I sacrificed my own comfort, my own needs, my own future for a son who could so casually dismiss me? The memories of my sacrifices, once a source of quiet pride, now turned into bitter accusations. I saw myself, a younger man, working overtime, denying myself small pleasures, always with Michael's future in mind. I saw Eleanor, her face radiant with love, explaining how it's for Michael, the furnace that I let break down in the winter, the threadbare clothes, the cancelled fishing trips, the endless odd jobs. They all paraded through my mind, each one a stark reminder of his profound ingratitude. The betrayal gnawed at me, a constant, dull ache that pulsed beneath my ribs. It wasn't just the cancelled Christmas, it was the complete lack of empathy, the absence of any real apology, the casual disregard for my feelings, my hopes, my love. He hadn't just broken a promise, he had broken my heart, crushed my spirit, and revealed the hollowness at the core of our relationship. It had always been transactional, hadn't it? I gave, he took, I provided, he consumed, I loved, he accepted, and when I had nothing left to physically give, my emotional offering was deemed worthless. Anger, slow and simmering, began to replace the initial shock and sadness. It was a righteous anger, a burning indignation that fueled my sleepless nights and restless days. How dare he treat me like this after everything I'd done? I had loved him unconditionally, supported him unwavering. I had built his comfortable life with my own two hands, with my own depleted pockets, and he just brushed me aside like an annoying fly. The confusion was equally crippling. Was I wrong? Was I being dramatic, as he had accused? Did I expect too much? Was a father's unconditional love and sacrifice truly supposed to be met with such cold indifference? I tried to rationalize it, to find an excuse for him. He was busy, he had a demanding job, his family needed him, but each attempt at justification crumbled under the weight of his callous words. There was no excuse. There was only the stark, ugly truth of his profound selfishness. I walked into the living room one evening. The house plunged into darkness except for the forlorn twinkle of the Christmas lights. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window. An old man stooped, defeated, his eyes hollow with pain. I looked utterly broken, like a vase that had been shattered and glued back together too many times, now finally collapsed into dust. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. My entire life had been a series of acts of devotion, culminating in this profound rejection. A profound sense of emptiness settled deep in my bones. The love I felt for Michael, once an unyielding force, now felt like a heavy burden. It had become a chain, binding me to a relationship that offered nothing but pain. The thought of him enjoying his convenient Christmas on a sunny beach, laughing with his in-laws, while I sat alone in my dark house, surrounded by the wreckage of my hopes, ignited a bitter fire within me. I picked up the baseball trophies Michael had won in high school, polishing one with my thumb. He'd left them behind when he moved out, never cared enough to take them with him. I had kept them, displayed them proudly, believing they represented a shared past, a bond that transcended distance and time. Now, they felt like relics from a different life, a different son. He had moved on, built a new life, a new family, and left me behind in the ruins of the old one. The despair was a suffocating blanket, thick and heavy. I felt used, exploited, my generosity taken for granted, my love trampled underfoot. The years of quiet sacrifice, the endless monthly payments, the financial burden I had willingly shouldered, it all seemed to have amounted to nothing more than enabling his selfishness. I had fostered his entitlement, allowed him to believe that the world, and specifically his father, owed him everything. And now, I was paying the ultimate price for my own misguided devotion. My heart was broken, my spirit was crushed, and the world seemed to have lost all its color. All that remained was the bleak, unending landscape of betrayal. Days turned into weeks, the calendar pages flapping by unnoticed. Christmas came and went, a hollow echo in my desolate home. Michael FaceTimed, just as he'd promised, his face tanned and smiling against a backdrop of swaying palm trees. He chatted brightly about the weather, the girls' joy at the beach, Sarah's parents' hospitality. I mumbled vague responses, my eyes stinging, my voice hoarse. He didn't seem to notice my subdued demeanor, or if he did, he didn't comment. He just kept talking about himself, his perfect, sun-drenched holiday. When the call ended, I felt more alone than ever. One evening, about a month after Christmas, I was staring at the stack of bills on my kitchen table. There was the gas bill, higher than usual because of the failing furnace, the property tax bill, due soon, and then, the reminder from Michael's bank, the automated notification that the next mortgage payment was due. My hand hovered over the keyboard, ready to initiate the transfer, as I had done for a decade without question. But something was different this time. A flicker, a spark in the darkness. I remembered my own bills, the ones I always pushed aside, telling myself I couldn't afford them. I remembered the cold nights, the threadbare clothes, the quiet shame of my sacrifices going utterly unnoticed. And then, I remembered Michael's face on the screen, so carefree, so utterly oblivious to the depth of my pain. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. But this time, it wasn't fear or sadness. It was a steel-hard resolve. A powerful shift began to occur within me. The despair, which had clung to me like a shroud, began to peel away, replaced by a chilling clarity. I had been a fool, a loving, devoted, self-sacrificing fool, but no more. The well of my unconditional love had run dry, poisoned by his ingratitude. Now, a different kind of wellspring was emerging, cold anger, and a burning, undeniable desire for justice. My mind, once clouded with grief, began to sharpen, focusing with a precision it hadn't known in years. I had given him everything. I had built his comfortable life, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, and his comfortable life was entirely predicated on my continued support. That was it. That was my leverage. The mortgage payments. I sat down at my old desk, the one Eleanor and I had bought when we first got married. I pulled out a blank notepad and a pen. My hands, which had trembled with sorrow for weeks, were now steady, almost unnervingly so. My pen scratched across the paper, the sound loud in the quiet room. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. This was about making him see, truly see, the consequences of his actions. It was about forcing him to confront the reality I had shielded him from for so long. It was about asserting my worth, reclaiming my dignity. The plan began to take shape, cold and logical. It wasn't impulsive, born of a fit of rage. It was calculated, precise, honed by years of silent suffering. Step 1. Stop the payments immediately. Not just the mortgage, but all the additional amounts I'd been sending to cover Sarah's renovations, the girls' private school, their riding lessons, all of it. The tap would run dry. My finger hovered over the cancel recurring transfer button on my online banking portal. This time, there was no hesitation. A strange sense of power surged through me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in decades. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and profoundly liberating. Step 2. Do nothing. I would not call him. I would not warn him. I would let the natural consequences of his financial reality unfold. I knew Michael. He wouldn't notice the absence of the payments immediately. He never checked his bank statements. He just assumed the money would always be there. He'd gotten used to that comfortable buffer, that invisible hand that always smoothed over his financial worries. He would only realize something was wrong when the bank, or perhaps Sarah, started asking questions. Step 3. Prepare for the confrontation. I knew it would come. Michael would eventually call, bewildered, then angry. He would demand an explanation, and I would be ready. I would be calm. I would be resolute. I would, for the first time in his life, make him truly listen. The transformation was profound. My stooped shoulders straightened a little. The hollow look in my eyes was replaced by a steely glint. I started taking care of myself again. I got that leaky faucet properly fixed. I called a furnace repairman. I even bought myself a new shirt, a crisp blue one, something I hadn't done in years. It wasn't about lavish spending. It was about investing in myself, in my own well-being. After years of neglect, I began to research. I wanted to understand the financial implications of missed mortgage payments, late fees, penalties, potential impact on credit scores. I familiarized myself with the language of banks and foreclosures. I didn't want to ruin him entirely, not yet, but I wanted to shake him awake, to yank him violently from his insulated bubble of entitlement. I pictured his eventual phone call, his initial confusion, then the dawning realization of what I had done, his anger, his accusations, and I pictured my response, calm, measured, unwavering. I would lay bare the truth, not with bitterness, but with the cold, hard facts of his ingratitude and my decades of sacrifice. I rehearsed the conversation in my mind, refining my words, honing my arguments. This wasn't just a battle, it was a reckoning. The anger wasn't a destructive, uncontrolled rage. It was a cold, focused fury, tempered by a deep-seated desire for justice. It was an engine, driving me forward. I felt empowered, not by a desire to inflict pain, but by the necessity of truth. My son needed to learn a lesson, one that I, in my misguided love, had failed to teach him. He needed to understand the true cost of his comfortable life, the real source of his security. And I, his father, was finally going to be the one to show him. The old broken man was gone. In his place stood a man forged in the fires of betrayal, armed with a newfound resolve and a plan for retribution. 2 months later, the The silence from Michael's end of the phone was deafening. I hadn't called him, hadn't sent a text, hadn't transferred a single cent. I had meticulously prepared for this, but the anticipation was still a heavy cloak around me. I knew it was coming, and I knew it would be explosive. Then, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Michael. My heart pounded a rhythm against my ribs, a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly, consciously relaxing my grip on the receiver. I let it ring a few extra times, just to collect myself, to ensure my voice would be calm, steady. "Hello, Michael," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the usual warmth. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" His voice was not calm. It was laced with panic and a barely suppressed rage, instantly confirming my suspicions. "My bank called. They said the mortgage payment for last month bounced. And then Sarah just told me that the girls' private school sent a notice. Their tuition wasn't paid. What is happening?" His voice rose with each question, escalating into a frantic shout. "I checked my account, Dad, and your usual transfer. It just stopped 2 months ago. Why didn't you tell me? Do you have any idea what kind of trouble this puts us in? My credit score is going to be ruined. The bank is threatening late fees, and Sarah's furious about the school." I listened, my expression unwavering, my gaze fixed on the quiet street outside my window. The rage in his voice, the panic, the absolute bewilderment. It was exactly as I had predicted. He truly had been completely oblivious. "I imagine it does put you in some trouble, Michael," I replied, my voice disturbingly even. "And I imagine Sarah is furious. I'm sure the bank will charge you significant late fees. It's a lot of money, isn't it? Especially when you're suddenly responsible for it yourself." "Responsible for it myself?" he bellowed, disbelief ringing in his voice. "Dad, what are you talking about? You've always paid it. For years, it was always understood. You can't just stop without warning. This is insane. Why would you do this to me? Why would I do this to you?" I repeated, a slow, cold anger beginning to coil in my own chest. But I kept my voice measured. "Let me tell you why. Michael, you want to know why I stopped? I stopped because for 20 years, I poured every spare penny, every ounce of my effort, every deferred dream, into your life. I stopped because I spent my entire retirement fund on your down payment. I stopped because I took odd jobs to pay your mortgage, your renovations, your daughter's private school, their horseback riding lessons, while my own furnace broke down, while my own clothes wore thin, while my own house crumbled around me. Asterisk, asterisk." I paused, letting the words sink in, letting the weight of them press down on him. "And what did I get in return, Michael? A casual dismissal for Christmas, an offhand remark about convenience, a FaceTime call while you basked in the Florida sun, oblivious to the fact that I was sitting alone in a dark house, my heart shattered, knowing that you didn't care enough to spend a single holiday with the man who built your entire comfortable life." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. For a fleeting second, I almost felt a pang of regret. But then, the memory of his cold voice, his casual cruelty, hardened my resolve. "You really think you're justified in this, Dad?" he finally choked out, his voice now trembling with a mixture of anger and a dawning, terrifying realization. "You think you have the right to sabotage my family, my credit, everything I've worked for, just because you felt hurt about Christmas?" "Sabotage?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "I didn't sabotage you, Michael. I simply removed the support system you took for granted. I stopped enabling your profound sense of entitlement. You want to know what you've worked for, son? You've worked for a facade built on my sacrifices. You want to know what you're responsible for? The comfort you and Sarah enjoy, the opportunities your girls have, the very roof over your head. All of it, without my help, is now yours to bear." "You're unbelievable," he seethed, the tremor in his voice turning into a raw fury. "You're an old, bitter man. You're trying to punish me. Fine, you want to punish me. You want your pathetic little revenge. Then consider it done. But don't expect to ever see me again, or your granddaughters, for that matter. You hear me? You're dead to me." The phone clicked, the line going dead once more. My hand, instead of trembling, remained steady. A profound quiet settled over me, deeper and more complete than any silence I had felt since Eleanor passed. It wasn't despair this time. It was the quiet of a storm finally broken, of a long overdue truth finally spoken. I sank into my armchair, closing my eyes. The words had been said. The dam had burst. The years of unacknowledged sacrifice, the bitter hurt, the simmering anger, it had all poured out. And now, there was only a vast, empty space. But in that emptiness, there was a strange, unexpected lightness. Suddenly, a loud banging erupted at my front door, rattling the glass panes. I opened my eyes, startled. The banging intensified, accompanied by Michael's enraged shouts. "Dad, open the door. You can't do this. Open the damn door." My breath hitched. He had driven all the way here, immediately. This wasn't just a phone call anymore. This was a physical confrontation. I felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. I stood up, my old bones protesting, but a new strength flowed through me. I walked slowly to the door, my heart hammering. I opened the door to find Michael standing on my porch, his face red and contorted with fury. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, a stark contrast to the polished, composed man I usually saw. "What the hell is wrong with you, Dad?" he roared, storming past me into the living room, his eyes wild. He gestured wildly around the room, taking in the still-decorated Christmas tree, the familiar furniture. "You think this is okay? You think you can just ruin my life because of some childish grudge about Christmas?" "It wasn't a childish grudge, Michael," I said, my voice still calm, my gaze steady. "It was the culmination of decades of your selfishness and my foolish enabling. You call this revenge. I call it a lesson you desperately needed to learn." He lunged forward, his hand grabbing my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "A lesson? You think I need a lesson? I'm a grown man, Dad. I have a family, a career. You're the one who needs a lesson in common decency." He yanked my arm, spinning me around. I stumbled, catching myself on the edge of the armchair. The pain flared in my shoulder, but I ignored it. "Decency," I scoffed, pulling my arm free. "You lecture me about decency. Where was your decency when you allowed me to pay for your lavish lifestyle while I pinched pennies? Where was your decency when you blew off Christmas, after all I'd done for you?" He snarled, his eyes blazing with a dangerous fury. He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "You don't understand, do you? You never understood. You just kept giving and giving, making me feel like I owed you something. It was suffocating. I didn't ask for all of it. I just wanted a father, not a personal bank account." The words hit me like stones. Asterisk, he didn't ask for all of it. Asterisk, suffocating. This twisted narrative, this rewriting of history, sent a fresh wave of rage coursing through me. "You didn't ask for it," I cried, my voice finally rising, cracking with the intensity of my emotion. "You never had to ask, Michael. You just hinted, and I provided. You never had to lift a finger to ensure your own comfort. I gave it to you on a silver platter, and you accepted it, every single time, without a single genuine word of thanks." He raised his hand, his fist clenched, his body trembling with anger. For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to strike me, but then, he redirected his rage, smashing his fist into the antique wooden mantelpiece beside him. The wood splintered with a sickening crack. A porcelain figurine, a small shepherd from Eleanor's Christmas nativity scene, toppled and shattered on the hearth. My blood ran cold. That figurine, Eleanor had loved it. It was irreplaceable. "Michael," I yelled, my voice sharp with a sudden, primal anger, transcending my usual placidity. "Look what you've done. That was your mother's." He didn't seem to hear me, or didn't care. His eyes were wild, unfocused, driven by a raw, frustrated fury. He grabbed the framed photo of Eleanor and me, a wedding picture, from the top of the mantelpiece. Your mother was just as bad. Always pushing, always expecting, always for Michael. For Michael." He threw the frame to the floor, the glass shattering. Eleanor's smiling face staring up at me from the shards. A red haze descended. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about him desecrating my memories, spitting on Eleanor's love, destroying the last vestiges of our shared past. He had crossed the line. Without thinking, I lunged forward, years of repressed anger exploding within me. My hands, surprisingly strong, grabbed his shoulders and shoved him hard. He stumbled backward, caught off guard, bumping into the Christmas tree. Ornaments rained down, shattering on the floor. The tree swayed precariously, light sparking. "Get out!" I roared, my voice ragged, unfamiliar even to myself. "Get out of my house. You don't deserve to be here. You never did." He regained his balance, his face a mask of shock and fury. He launched himself at me, a desperate, animalistic cry escaping his lips. his arms wrapped around me, and he pushed me against the wall, slamming my head against the plaster. Stars exploded behind my eyes, and a sharp pain shot through my skull. My vision swam, but I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever again. I brought my knee up hard, connecting with his thigh. He grunted, loosening his grip. I shoved him again, using every ounce of strength I possessed, fueled by decades of silent resentment. He reeled back, tripping over a fallen ornament, and crashed to the floor amidst the shattered glass and broken tree branches. He lay there for a moment, stunned, staring up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and something akin to fear. He had never seen me like this. This wasn't the docile, giving father he had always known. This was a man pushed to his absolute breaking point, a man asserting his last shred of dignity. "Get out," I repeated, my voice now a low, dangerous growl. "And don't you ever, ever come back here again." I pointed a trembling finger towards the door, my chest heaving, every muscle aching. He slowly, cautiously, got to his feet, his gaze never leaving mine. His face was pale, his fury replaced by a simmering resentment, but also a grudging recognition of the man standing before him. The dramatic power shift was complete. He had come here to rage, to intimidate, to demand his entitlement. But he was leaving, broken and defeated, having faced the true depth of his father's pain and newfound resolve. He turned and stumbled out of the living room, through the front door, and into the cold night, leaving behind a trail of shattered glass, a broken figurine, and the wreckage of a lifetime of misguided love. I stood amidst the destruction, my heart still pounding, a strange, cathartic release washing over me. The aftermath of Michael's visit left my living room looking like a war zone, scattered with shattered ornaments, splintered wood, and the lifeless twinkling of the dislodged Christmas lights. My head throbbed, a dull ache behind my eyes, and my shoulder protested with every movement. But despite the physical pain and the mess, a peculiar sense of calm had settled over me. The storm had passed. The emotional deluge had finally broken. I walked slowly through the wreckage, picking up the pieces of the shattered porcelain shepherd Eleanor's figurine. It couldn't be repaired, not really, but I carefully gathered the fragments, placing them gently in a small box. I then picked up the broken photo frame, Eleanor's smiling face, still visible through the cracks in the glass. He had destroyed them, yes, but he hadn't destroyed the memories. Those were mine, etched deeply into my heart. Safe from his destructive rage. In the days that followed, an eerie silence settled over my phone. No calls from Michael, no angry texts. The air, once thick with unspoken tension and unacknowledged pain, now felt lighter, almost breathable. He had made good on his threat. He was dead to me, and I, it seemed, was dead to him. The father-son bond, once thought to be unbreakable, lay irrevocably changed, perhaps shattered beyond repair. I began the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding, not just my living room, but my life. I started with the simplest tasks. I took down the Christmas tree, carefully packing away the few unbroken ornaments, each one a bittersweet reminder of a hope that had died. I swept up the glass shards, patched the splintered mantelpiece, and found a new frame for Eleanor's photo. As I worked, a quiet understanding settled in my heart. This wasn't an act of revenge, not anymore. This was an act of self-preservation, a reclamation of my own worth. My original intention had been to make him realize the depth of his ingratitude, to force him to confront the harsh reality of his financial predicament, and in a brutal, violent way, I had succeeded. He was now fully facing the consequences of relying entirely on my generosity. I knew he would struggle. The mortgage payments, the school tuition, the upkeep of his lifestyle, it would all come crashing down on him. He would have to make hard choices, sacrifices he had never imagined, and for the first time in his life, he would have to do it all himself. The realization wouldn't be easy for him. He would likely remain angry, resentful even, but in that anger, perhaps, a tiny seed of understanding would eventually take root. He would feel the pinch, the anxiety, the pressure that I had silently carried for decades. He would have to work harder, smarter, and perhaps, just perhaps, he would eventually connect those dots to my years of unwavering support. It was a painful lesson, but a necessary one. For me, the peace I found wasn't complete, nor was it without its own sorrow. The vision of a loving, close relationship with my son, a shared old age filled with grandchildren and quiet conversations, was gone. It was a dream I had cherished for so long, a dream I had sacrificed everything for, and now it was irrevocably lost. That loss left a permanent ache in my heart, a constant reminder of what could have been, but in its place, something new began to grow, a sense of self, a quiet dignity. I had asserted my worth. I had, for the first time, prioritized my own needs, my own emotional well-being. The weight of his entitlement, which had pressed down on me for so long, had finally lifted. I no longer felt like a utility, an ATM to be exploited. I was George, a man who had loved deeply, given generously, and finally, after years of silent suffering, stood up for himself. I began to live my own life, truly for the first time in decades. I reconnected with Frank, started those fishing trips again. I finally fixed the furnace properly, luxuriating in the warmth it provided. I spent time in my garden, planting new roses, watching them bloom with a quiet satisfaction. I started volunteering at the local community center, finding purpose and connection in helping others who genuinely appreciated my efforts. The father-son bond, as I knew it, was undoubtedly broken. There would be no easy path to rebuilding it, perhaps no path at all. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too profound. But I had delivered my retribution, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for justice and truth. And in that act, I had found a measure of peace. My heart, though scarred, was no longer shattered. It was whole again. Perhaps not in the way I had always envisioned, but whole nonetheless. I was forever changed, no longer the naive, trusting father, but a man who had faced the darkness and emerged, perhaps not unscathed, but undeniably stronger, and finally, free.